It is New Year's Eve, and that means that in a couple of hours we're going to leave what might just have been the worst year in the history of our lives behind. To celebrate that, I thought I'd give you a list of my personal favorite metalcore releases of the year. We're going to do this step by step. We're going to start at number 10, work our way down all the way to number 1. And I'm going to give you a little bit of input, just like my basic opinion on each and every one of the record. So, without further ado, let's jump right in. The first one is already going to be a bit controversial, I think, because it is I Let It In and It Took Everything by Loath. So, objectively speaking, this probably is the best record of the year. I personally just ranked it at my number 10 because I didn't enjoy it as much as the other 9 albums on this list, but like I said, objectively, this is probably the best metalcore release this year. It's got really nice and dark atmosphere, the instrumentals, especially the groove, are insane, and the vocals are pretty good too. Basically, why this one is ranked so low is just the fact that I couldn't really get into the more calm songs, and I didn't really enjoy the more calm parts of the heavier songs, which is sad because I really loved them in The Cold Sun. Next up on number 8 we've got Guardians by August Burns Red. So I've never been all that much of an August Burns Red fan, but what can I say, this album made me an August Burns Red fan. It's definitely a lot less monotone than a lot of the other August Burns Red records. It has a good chunk of more emotional songs, and it's actually got I wouldn't say clean singing, but really good pitched screams, for example, in the chorus of Lidos, which I really enjoy. It's a pretty good change up from what August Burns Red used to do. That being said, you still have those really earth-shattering breakdowns and really groovy riffs, which everyone came to like about August Burns Red. So it's nothing completely new. It doesn't reinvent the wheel or anything, but it's August Burns Red. It doesn't really have to reinvent the wheel to be good. So coming in at number 8, we've got what I suppose is one of the more unknown records on this list, and it's Lovelorn by Before I Turn. This is a band that was formerly known as Evil Currents, and I think that will change with this record because this is a much more unique approach to metalcore than what they did before. Overall, this is a super heavy album, and the production is really beefy, the vocals are insane and almost deathcore-esque, I'd say. But it's also got some calmer songs, and I really like the balance that this gives to the album. I knew and liked the band before, but not that much, so it's a pretty nice surprise to see that this album ended up on number 8 of my favorite albums of the year. Number 7 will probably be the most unknown record on this list, and it's Voyager by Blue Shift. I think that's how you pronounce it, Voyager? I'm not sure. This is a record that I fell almost instantly in love with, and the reason is quite simple. It basically gave me what I was missing ever since Era changed their style. It is very inspired by older Era records like Augment, but it's also got those more calm melodies and almost hypnotizing stuff like in Drift or Neon. It's a bit softer than, for example, Augment used to be, but that style works fine for them. And I'm overall just really happy that this album was released because it fills a void in me that was there ever since Era changed their style, and ever since Era is quite hard to pronounce, to be honest. You're fucking Number 6 is Splinters from an Ever-Changing Phase by End. End is a side project by Counterparts frontman Brendan Murphy, and there's honestly not all that much to say about it other than it's heavy as fuck. Seriously, if you're listening to this album and you're not trashing your room, you're doing something wrong. I would describe it as a 30-minute breakdown compilation with really eerie atmosphere, and it's just super fun to listen to. Coming in at number 5, we've got Alpha Wolf and their sophomore album, A Quiet Place to Die. Alpha Wolf is a bit more on the hardcore leaning side, so naturally what you're going to expect is like banging riffs and really hard breakdowns. And sure, that is what this album does best, but aside from that, you've also got like some pretty good depth in the lyrics and also 2 or 3 a bit more calm songs that are actually pretty emotional. This album is honestly a huge improvement over everything they've released so far, and I'm pretty excited about what they got in pedo for us next, because this album is just so much fun. Seriously, I was listening to this record exclusively for like at least 3 weeks after its release, so that says something. We arrived at number 4, which means that this is where the 10s out of 10s and 9s out of 10s start coming. And on number 4, we've got How to Survive a Funeral by Make Them Suffer. This album is absolutely amazing, and I can't stress that enough. Seriously, this is like one of the most bipolar records that I have ever heard. It mixes up emotion with like absolute heaviness so good that it's literal perfection for this style. It's got like those really hard-hitting moments where you feel like you've just been punched in the face, or those really gut-wrenching emotional parts. I feel like those 2 things wouldn't be compliments in other genres, but in metalcore they are, and they are 2 pretty big compliments. Overall, and the same thing can definitely be applied to all of the other remaining records. In a lot of other years, this would have probably been my favorite album of the year, but this year was just so insane when it comes to releases that it only made number 4. Are we We're now entering the top 3, and my 3rd favorite record of the year was Passenger by Kingdom of Giants. Kingdom of Giants actually is one of the very first metalcore bands I remember actively listening to, but somewhere along the way my taste just changed and I started to need to have everything more proggy or focus on breakdowns or just generally harder. So seeing them as my 3rd favorite album is absolutely crazy for me. It is, however, nothing less than deserved to have them here, because this album is nothing short of amazing. It's got some of the most beautiful choruses I've ever heard, it's got emotion, the production is perfect, and there's also some smaller electronic elements that work really well and they aren't overdone like in a lot of other records. Honestly, it's kind of hard to explain what makes this record so good, because it doesn't really do anything new. It just does what it does so damn well. So I really recommend you to listen to it if you haven't already. It's definitely one of my favorite albums of the year. Coming in at number 2, we've got my favorite band Currents and their new album, The Way It Ends. I'm not going to lie to you, when this album was released, I was really disappointed, and it all came down to me just missing what made The Place I Feel Safe is such an outstanding record, because it was so heavy, it was so genty, it's got like this really progressive metalcore vibe, but it's also so emotional, and The Way It Ends just didn't have that. But what I realized somewhere in like, I think it was like a month after its release, is that you don't necessarily need all that it's still got this really emotional Currents core in it, it's got the great lyrics and the great vocals, but it's just sacrificed the heaviness for even more emotionality, and that is actually something really great, because all of the things that I just mentioned just make this album so much more unique. This is way beyond your normal metalcore record. This is like art, proper art. We arrived at the top spot, and the fact that it's not Current still blows my mind every day I think about it. It's Graveyou by Invent Animate. I never listened to Invent Animate before Graveyou, at least I didn't like it. I tried to get into them a couple of times, I listened to Still World and Everchanger in full, but I just didn't enjoy the music at all. Graveyou changed that. From the moment I first listened to the record, I knew this was going to be my album of the year. And after I listened to it, I went and revisited their older albums, and something in my head just clicked and I suddenly enjoyed literally every release of them. In general, I think that speaks a whole bunch about the quality of the record. In general, it's a lot less ambient and atmospheric. than, for example, Still World, but as opposed to Still World, it's really melodic and it's got really great choruses that just stick in your head. And that makes the album so much more accessible than everything they've released so far, without sacrificing too much of what makes Invent Animate Invent Animate. This is a perfect record in my opinion, and if you haven't listened to it already, I can't stress this enough. Go listen to it now. It's such an experience. It's a wonderful journey. Like, just laying down, closing your eyes and listening to this album is so good. That's it with the video, guys. Thank you so much. If you're still here, that means you've at least skipped through the video, maybe even watched it in full, so thank you for that. And have a good year. Good new year. Yeah.